Hello YouTube, this is another series of knife reviews, and this time on the table there's three knives. There's a M8 Miguron Clear, the Vosteed Nightshade and the Petrified Fish Haverock. And this particular review is about the Vosteed Nightshade. Please refer to my other content if you want to see reviews about some other knives or the ones that you've just seen. But this particular one we're gonna be focusing on the Nightshade, and in this particular case in black micarta with some studs as opposed to thumb hole and flipper, which are the other versions that are available for this particular size. Knife steel in this knife is Nitro V, which is a decent budget steel, which is relatively good in terms of toughness. Lags behind D2 and your other budget knife steels a little bit in terms of edge retention. If you're after edge retention, you're probably better served with a decent D2 or a 154 cm, but it's not a slouch either, and especially if it's hardened well and combined with a good cutting geometry, it can be an excellent knife steel for the money. Now this is an interesting knife, and I was reluctant for a long time. First seeing that pop up, I thought, well, you know, you see so many new knives coming out all the time, and you see the weirdest of shapes and knife blade geometries, and you can't help but wonder what is that supposed to be good for. And you see absurdly thick knives, you see knife blades that are shaped like a shark, and all of that is kind of beyond me. And the feeling that comes up, okay, here's another company, they want to sell a knife, they don't know what to do, and it's just for the novelty of it, they thought, well, we do something goofy, and here we go. And initially, I have to say, my initial box category, I put that in. I thought, oh well, another one of these. But then it appealed to me a little bit because I could see that the handle to blade geometry would kind of support a relatively good access to a tip cutting action. And I spent a little bit of time researching it, looking at it, and it is what is actually called a Taiwanese shilling cutter, which is a traditional knife shape in Taiwan. Look, traditional usually means something is established and proven by time, and most certainly it doesn't look attractive, but it cries out, hey, I'm a tool. I don't try to be pretty, I try to be functional. And for that reason, and for that reason alone, I thought, well, you know, everybody's raving about it, and perhaps we should have a closer look at it. And so here it is, and I have to say it grows on you. In terms of aesthetics, I'm still not a great fan. There's other knives where I would say, what a beauty, and this is sympathy, perhaps, for a tool, and respecting it for what it is intended for and its functionality, but I still can't say it's pretty. If I looked at the blade shape alone, I can see the bamboo leaf kind of aesthetic to it, and yeah, that kind of is alright, and that reminds me a little bit of the Urban EDC Nessie, which kind of is alright, kind of has appeal to it, but then that weird shape of the handle and the angle in relation to the blade just take it off in terms of aesthetics. It's just not there. And okay, so with that out of the way, let's have a look at it. Vosteed is a relatively new knife company, and the first thing you notice when you open, or when you open the box is for budget knife, and I'm saying budget knife, $69 for something in Nitro V is not necessarily a bargain, or I wouldn't categorize it as such, especially today. I did a review of the Haverock by comparison. That's a budget knife, right? That is a decent steel. It's a crate action. It has a couple of flaws, but it is substantially cheaper than something like the Vosteed. So there's that aspect to it. But that being said, there's a number of details that are really quite nice. Starting with, I like that little accent there around the pivot. You've got that copper inlay. That's rather nice. When you flip it around, the next thing you notice, which is rather uncommon on a budget knife, is you get a crown spine. And that is a nice little detail that I certainly didn't expect. Next thing is the jimping. So there you go, look at that. That is perfectly executed, really well done jimping. Right? There's nothing wrong with that. You got a little bit of contouring going on. The scales aren't overly contoured, but comfortable, and they are machined flush to the liners. So there's nothing in here that says, well, you know, we hurried things up a little bit. And you can see, even on those liners, weight reduction was a concern. So they milled out the internals. Yeah, all of that is really lovely to see. Centering, all on point. Nothing wrong with that either. Well, detail on the pivot screw. Yep, that's a little bit of a radiation symbol pattern going on there. Milled out. That looks nice. Nothing wrong with that. Overall, the aesthetics of that, yeah, no, I absolutely agree that that looks great. Nothing wrong with it. You have a closer look at the pocket clip, and that's nice and generous. Plenty of space. And look at that. Recessed into the scales with countersunk screws. Wow, you know, how hard can it be? Well, it's not, you know. It amazes me that in today's world, where we see 50 new knives coming out each week, there's so very few who get that little detail right. Here we are. That's how it should be. Nice. Pocket clip is functional, sticking out a little bit at the bill there, but that's alright. It goes in and out of the pocket just fine. It's a well executed pocket clip. Action. Now this, straight away, you open this up, and the first thing that got into my mind is, that feels like a Kaiser knife. It does absolutely feel like a Kaiser knife. I would compare that to a Kaiser T1. I'd compare it to a Tauser K from Kaiser. It has exactly that vibe to it. Closing action, same thing. This is feeling like a Kaiser T1. Exactly the same thing. So whoever builds this knife for Vosteed, and I have a strong suspicion it is Kaiser, they got their business just right. It's a light blade, right? So there's not much heft to it. It's a thin, let's check on the thickness of the blade. That's a 3mm plate stock. So for you guys out of the States, 0.11 inches, right? There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Where it really starts to shine is thickness behind the edge. hold on, let me get that right there, 0.018. So that's a nice slicing edge. And the next thing, out of many knives that I received ex-factory, this comes hair popping sharp. Whether that is the case for all of them, I cannot tell, but somebody spent time making sure this leaves the factory sharp. It absolutely is a razor sharp edge. It's not the steepest grind, but it's been sharpened properly. It's been done right. Another thing worth mentioning is if we have a closer look at the sharpening choil, you can see the plunge grind has a rather small radius, and there's plenty of room for your sharpenings without putting a smile at the end of your blade. Right? While we're at it, and while you can see it so nicely, bright and shiny, Vosteed doesn't have any issue whatsoever to sacrifice contour of the presentation side scale for good lock bar access. And I don't care, because if I do have that knife open, I don't care what that looks like, because I'm going to have the knife in my hand. What I do care about is finding that spot and having easy access to it if I want to close it. And once I have it closed, who cares? Now, why is that so hard for so many companies to understand? Is it because the knife has to sit somewhere on a presentation table and we cannot have a look at a silver piece of metal underneath the scales? That would be an eyesore. Is that it? I don't know. This is easy. I mean, this is how we want it, right? Good lock bar access, right? Use your design intuition to make that look whatever way you feel is aesthetically pleasing, but don't sacrifice lock bar access, right? And this is done right. That's what we want to see. There's not a lot of room, right? It's a relatively narrow scale. It's not the thinnest contour, but that's the kind of lock bar access you want. That's great. Awesome. Yeah, making a compromise, making the right decision. In this particular case, don't sacrifice functionality for small aesthetical things nobody cares about. Do it like that. That's done right. No complaints, right? Another thing that I'm a little bit puzzled about is you can see there's a little bit of jimping going on here. And perhaps the community, you guys out there, can comment on what that might be for, because I can't make it out. It is sitting slightly under the scales, and so if I held the knife this way, for whatever reason I wanted to do that, it provides a tiny bit of grip here. Not a lot, but okay. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. If I open the knife and we look at the underside, you see that jimping. It's not sitting at the right angle for me to actually do anything while I choke up on the knife. It just sits under the scale. So it's not exposed enough for me to make use of that jimping. Right? So I have the suspicion that something in the design phase went wrong with the angles of that particular element in relation to the scales. Because it would make a lot of sense to have these exposed and actually sitting above the scales to give you jimping when you're choking up off the knife in a pinch position like that. Right? That would make a lot of sense. But right now, right there, that jimping just isn't doing an awful lot. So if you guys know why, let's bring it up a little bit closer, why they put that jimping there, please enlighten me. I would like to know. I mean, I really would want to know. Okay, that's it. Now, as far as cutting performance is concerned, I put it through its paces. And I have to say, it is an excellent slicer. And that is just by virtue of its full flat grind, a really nice and sharp blade, and, well, to a degree also the angle of the blade in relation to the handle. And the reason is that if you're holding that particular knife and you're cutting through cardboard, you always encourage your knife edge to actually engage at about a 90-degree angle of the cutting radius that your wrist introduces. And that works a treat. So for slicing cardboard or slicing things in general, this is a knife shape and a knife geometry in relation to the handle geometry that actually makes a lot of sense. And it has a tool character that you cannot deny. It is very good and very specialized though. Another thing where it really works well is if you think about using the tip of your knife, because naturally this knife will end up in relation to your cutting surface in a much steeper angle than your regular knife, while still being comfortable in hand. You can see that any kind of precision cutting is naturally ending up in a very tip up position where not a lot of material has to glide through the material in order to make the cut. And that is why this particular knife also performs really well with precision cuts. So that also is a great feature of this particular blade. You can put a lot of pressure on that tip. So that's a positive. So any kind of draw cut with this blade will work extremely well. Where it doesn't shine so much is when you get into rolling cuts, just because you're limited, you're starting to bottom out and you don't have enough of a belly beyond the tip there to do meaningful rolling cuts. It's just not the same as, let's say, a knife with a accentuated belly where you have a lot of freedom of rolling your blade, right? It's just not available on this particular knife geometry. So rolling cuts, it doesn't perform so well. And the same goes for push cuts. If you have a look, you really, if you want to cut into thicker material, you can see how you have to tilt the knife down in order to get into the belly section of the blade that would promote a positive push cut, right? If you compare that, let's say, also to the Miguron M8, you can see how we're engaging into a relatively generous belly that would work well for a push cut, just because you have that nice ramping angle going on. So a slicer, but beyond that, what makes it excel in these areas that I mentioned before, draw cuts, tip cutting and slicing, it sacrifices in other areas where you say, okay, push cuts and rolling cuts, it's not really its territory. It's not where this knife will be performing all too well. Also in terms of tip geometry, you can see it's coming into a relatively delicate edge there. Can we please sharpen up a little bit? So this is a rather delicate edge at the tip, so certainly this is not a knife shape that is geared towards more outdoorsy applications. And I would say this is a great EDC carry knife for slicey and precision cuts. So that's just what it is. It is not a knife shape that I would say is very universal. It is a little bit specialized, right? But overall, there's nothing wrong with being a little bit special, right? So, and it is executed extremely well. I have to say, I have no issues whatsoever recommending this knife for a number of reasons. For one, I'm really positively surprised by the quality that you receive. Little features that you wouldn't expect in that price point, like a crown spine, like a properly I can't believe I'm even saying that, but you wouldn't expect a properly done pocket clip, because you get a $200 full titanium knife and they can't get the pocket clip right. Okay, I mean, you get something like the Civivi Pintail and they can't get the pocket clip right. You know, yeah, this is good, yeah. So they're paying attention to a lot of little things. My only gripe, my only little niggle, and that's perhaps just me not knowing, is the jimping on the bottom of that flipper tab that doesn't exist area. So that bugs me. I would really like to know what that is all about. Yeah. Other than that, go out, get a Nightshade. The only thing that I would contemplate is whether to get the thumb hole version or the thumb stud version. As far as that thumb stud being in the way of the cutting path, it's really minimal, right? So even, you know, depending on how you hold the knife in this particular case, it's not as easy to make out, but it's not much, right? And yeah, perhaps the thumb hole would be my preferred option, really. I just went with this one because the other ones just plain weren't available, because their availability isn't very good on those. Not if you buy them from Vosteed directly. They're permanently sold out, and you really have to be a little bit lucky to be able to get hold of one. So I went with the thumb stud. I don't like the flipper. I don't like anything poking out of that side, really. And that works well, but reverse flicking, yeah, but it works, but I gotta focus on it, not so much. I think with a thumb hole you would get two advantages, and you can see straight away one of the reasons why Spydercos are so successful is because you've got the convenience of a Spidey flick backflip opening, you've got a thumb opening, slow rolling, and at the same time you have nothing in the way of your cutting path. So that makes a lot of sense. And the aesthetics look rather nice too with the thumb hole, so I wouldn't have any issues with that. So yeah, I suppose I'd buy it again, but next time around, once they become available, I'll probably get the thumb hole version of that one, just for functional reasons. As far as aesthetics is concerned, it wouldn't be my first choice. I wouldn't be buying this knife at all, but it is a traditional shape, well worth having in your collection just because it works. It is excellent in a lot of ways for specific tasks. Very ergonomic, good in hand. Everything about that is really, really nice, and it grows on you a little bit. If I perhaps spend another few weeks with it, maybe I'll even love it. I doubt it, but yeah. these are my 2 cents on the Nightshade from Vosteed, and compliments for a rather well executed specimen. Yeah, and that's been me for today, and I wish you all have a good rest of the week, and pop back in for new content periodically. Alright, thank you, bye bye.